You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Och Hjelmin och Nackler Schwarzenegger!
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for May 3rd, 2017, Wednesday. And a lot of news in the world of soccer over the last few days. And the best possible guest to talk about all of them. And according to social media a few minutes ago, Paul, you will be able to talk about Toti as well. Paul Tenorion of 442 USA. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I'm going to talk about Chicago and Orlando in a few seconds, Paul, but I have to start with where Caesar, right? We have to give him credit. Francesco Totti officially announced his retirement from the beautiful game from Roma. And Paul, you had a great story that you shared on social media a few minutes ago about Francesco Totti.
Well, listen, I grew up a huge fan of Totti. He was probably my favorite player as a young kid, and it's kind of funny because I was a fullback. I could never have played like Totti. I never tried to play like Totti, but I loved him. And so in 2014, when I was in Orlando, I was covering obviously Orlando City, and they played a friendly against Roma at the Wild World of Sports field, which puts you're basically right on top of the field when you're covering it. And Totti was there, and he scored the game-winning goal. And afterwards in the press conference, he was answering questions in Italian. He had a translator there. And one of the local reporters asked a question that probably lasted about a minute. She asked, this kind of long, meandering question. And at the very end of it, it was basically, would you ever come to MLS? Which, anyone who knows Totti knows how hilarious that is. I mean, this is a guy who wouldn't leave Roma for the biggest clubs in the world. And Totti, who I had a kind of a feeling that he didn't need a translator. He put his hand up to the translator. He understood everything she said. And he leaned forward and into the microphone and he said, no, and then leaned back with a big smile on his face, almost basically kicking his feet up on the table. And I it took everything I had not to crack up laughing, but it was the perfect Totti moment, just cool as could be. And, he was always the coolest guy in the room, the coolest guy on the field. And it was just a great moment for me because I was such a huge Totti fan growing up.
You bring me back so many memories. Totti was one of my favorite player. I started to fell in love in the games in the early 2000s, playing FIFA on different video game console with Roma. Totti, for some reason, was my favorite player on those games. And then I started covering the game and seeing the exact definition of a true professional in Totti. Loyalty mixed with like the dream of a kid. It's basically the best example. Let's talk about his loyalty. And you mentioned how Totti was always loyal to Roma, never left Roma. And when he thought his own play level was diminishing, he retired from the international game to focus on his club career. What can you tell us about Roma's best player ever as Francesco Totti?
No, I mean, I think obviously he is a player almost from a bygone era. I mean, in nowadays sports world and football and everything else, you see players jumping from different teams, going for the most money. And, you see Ronaldo playing for Manchester United and then playing for Real Madrid. And it's very rare that you see players that start at clubs that aren't one of the bigger clubs in the world and then choose to stay there despite offers. And Totti had the chances to go to the Real Madrids and to the great clubs of the world. And it was more important to him to play for the club of his childhood. He was a Roman. He grew up in Rome and he wanted to play for Roma. And, I remember as a kid, I came home one day to watch him with Rome win the Scudetto. And I remember the fans running onto the field before the final whistle happened to celebrate the title. And I remember they stripped Totti of his clothes. And there's this famous shot. I think he's wearing No one's taken his jersey off, but his shorts are gone. He's wearing just his underwear and his undershirt and his cleats, and on the field just crying tears of joy for having brought a title back to Roma. So, that says everything about who he was, and obviously the influence he had with Italy, the Italian national team as well. I mean, he's just one of the all-time great playmakers, and even later in his career, as he got up there in age, he was still able to score goals and have an influence. He won a World Cup, he won a Scudetto. There's not much more you can ask of a player, and I think he'll be remembered as one of the great players of our generation, certainly, and I think he'll also be remembered as maybe one of the greatest Italian players ever.
You mentioned the bygone era. It's refreshing for me when I talked about Totti, and I imagine for a lot of people when they talk about Totti, it's always about the game. It's always about him. It's always about the player. It's not about controversy. It's not about what he said, what he would have. And it's refreshing to, sometimes I feel I need a law degree to talk about sports. And when it's Totti, it actually always was about the game.
Absolutely. And, I just think, he's just one of the greats of all time. And it's been, there are a lot of players I look back and I say I feel very lucky to watch them as they come through in this generation. We've seen some of the greatest of all time, Ronaldo and Messi and Iniesta and Xavi, and you look at and I look at Totti the same way. And I got to see Zidane, and I got to see guys like Totti, and I feel very blessed because I think their influence on the game extends beyond just this generation. I think Totti inspired many, many people to go into the game and to play professionally. I think if you spoke to any player who's come out of Italy, they could probably tell you the influence Francesco Totti had on them. So that'll be his legacy. And it's a sad day when he plays his final game for Roma at the end of the season. It'll be a sad day, but he's had a wonderful career.
Moving to our bread and butter, Paul, Major League Soccer. And in Chicago this year, it has been quite a refreshing year so far for the Fire. On the pitch, some better result, not as highly as maybe expected with the arrival of Schweinsteiger. But what can you tell us about the arrival in Schweinsteiger and how in the first month and a half, how it has been so far?
Yeah, I think they've been quite pleased with the way Schweinsteiger's come into the team, the way he's integrated. I think, even he last week when I interviewed him here in Chicago, he said he still felt like he was only at about 70% fitness. So that just goes to show that, he's had a great influence so far, and he's not even fully fit yet. So I don't think we've seen fully what he's capable of doing in this league. But, this is definitely a much improved Chicago Fire team. Right now, 11 points through 8 games. They're right in the mix in the Eastern Conference, just 2 points behind Toronto, 2 points behind Columbus and New York for who are all tied for third place in the East. So they're right in the thick of things. Now, they're in the middle of this road swing, 3 straight games on the road, 3 very difficult games on the road. They went up to Toronto and lost. They went to the New York Red Bulls. I thought they were the better team in that game in New York, but they ended up losing 2-1. And now they've got to go across the country to LA to play in a game. So very difficult road swing. I thought they would have been happy to get 2 points out of it. Obviously, they'll need to try to get a win to reach that mark in LA. But I think overall, this is a better team. They still have some areas of need. I think they really need to go and sign somebody to play right back. If they don't do that, they're going to be in some real trouble. I think they could use some upgrades at center back and goalkeeper as well. But it's certainly not the Chicago Fire team of last year or 2 years ago. I mean, when you have a midfield of Schweinsteiger, Dax McCarty, and Juninho, you're going to be able to compete in any game. And I think they've also seen that they've got some guys that can be dynamic in the final third with David Akam, Nemanja Nikolic, Michael Deleu, and Louis Solignac. So there are more options right now for the Chicago Fire team.
It seemed to me the atmosphere and the pride of being a Chicago Fire player is back. It's one of the great teams in the early history of this league. And over the last few years, that has been forgotten. And there was almost it was the laughing stock of the league. And it had a feeling of, we're not necessarily proud. And it was tough for the supporters to come out and support this team the way it should be. And now with the recent success off the pitch, on the pitch, Schweinsteiger. But for me, the big piece that actually set the tone was this offseason when Dax McCarthy was acquired. How important is Dax McCarthy in the change of attitude, maybe in the locker room and for the supporters?
Yeah, I mean, it's been huge. Dax, you're getting exactly what they thought they were getting out of him. I mean, he is a leader in every sense of the word, in the way he acts and plays on the field, the way he demands results off the field, the way he looks for change off the field within the culture of the club, the larger club itself. He's been everything they could have asked for, and not only that, he's been the best player on the field for them. I think he has been absolutely phenomenal for the Chicago Fire this entire season. And even as much as Schweinsteiger has been a huge lift, I think he would not be as influential if he did not have Dax McCarty playing next to him. So, for me, this guy right now is a no-brainer all-star. He's a no-brainer MLS first team, best 11 player. We're early into the season, but he's been absolutely fantastic, and I think he's been a catalyst for change here. And I think, as the Fire continue to try to build off of what they've put together so far, I think he's going to be a guy who's constantly pushing for that.
Now, what's missing to finish with Chicago, Paul? What's missing for Chicago to break that ceiling, to cross that red line, to make themselves because the East, as much as Orlando is dominating, it's very strong, but there is a place to squeeze in and be part of that top half of the standings. So what does Chicago need to be in that top six?
Yeah, like I said, I think there are 3 spots for them that they could use upgrades. Right back, center back next to Johan Kappelhoff, and goalkeeper. And I think if they upgrade 2 of those 3 positions over the course of the season, I think they're a playoff team. They absolutely need to make a move at right back. And whether they go on the roster and they try Drew Connor or Matt Polster at that right back spot, they have to make a change. Michael Harrington hasn't been good enough. They've dropped too many points with goals that have come up that side of the field of teams that are targeting Michael Harrington. And if they do not make a change there, I think it's going to be a real struggle for them to be able to compete throughout the whole season. So I would expect them to make a trade within MLS or to go to the international market and find a right back. And if they do that, I think they'll be much more competitive. But I wouldn't be surprised. I would also look to add competition at goalkeeper. That would be something I would do if I was the GM. I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but those are the 2 spots I would certainly target. And I think at the very least, I think they will make a move at right back.
A team that you used to cover the beat for, Orlando, is having a surprising total domination in the Eastern Conference so far after 7 games. 1 or 2 games in hand and still top of the East, 18.6 wins, only 1 loss. What happened? What happened to Orlando? A team that during the offseason, everybody was wondering the direction with the roster, with the new members of the roster, what direction they were going to. Now they're top of the East, looking like world beaters, looking like the best team, and without their quote-unquote best player, just came back, Kaká. Are you surprised by Orlando's 2017 season so far?
I am surprised. I thought they were going to struggle this year, but as you said, they had a very, very active offseason, and I think they addressed a lot of problems. They have 3 new starters on the back line, Donny Toya, Jonathan Spector, and Scott Suter. They've got a new starter in midfield in Will Johnson. Carlos Rivas has finally grown into his own and is playing good soccer. And Kyle Larin has been incredibly hot to start the season. And I think that's probably the one thing that hasn't been dissected enough. They need to find more goal scorers because Kyle Larin has 6 of the 10 goals they've scored this season, and they can't rely on him to score 30 goals this season. But certainly they have improved tremendously. They've added veteran leadership to a team that was very, very young through its first 2 seasons. When you look at Jonathan Spector and Will Johnson especially, those guys have been enormous in lifting this team. I think Jonathan Spector might be, one of the best signings of the offseason in all of Major League Soccer. I really just think that that veteran leadership added exactly what this team needed. And then you look at what they did on the back line. They needed to become a better defensive team. They add a guy in Donny Toya who doesn't give you as much going forward, but he's a solid defensive player. And Scott Suter and Rafa Ramos on the right side, those are guys that like to bomb forward and get involved in the attack. So it's a little bit more defensive balance now there on the back line. Joe Bendick has been very good. The pieces have just come together, and I think it's a credit to Jason Kreis. It's a credit to Nicky Butelich, the GM. They had a very clear vision for the offseason. They had some issues they had to get around. The money that had been given to Antonio Nocerino really hurt in the salary cap. David Mateos' salary really hurt. Breck Shea was on a really high number. And then they brought in Will Johnson on a high number. They brought in Jonathan Spector on a high number. So they had to make some moves to make it work. I think the Kevin Molino trade basically allowed them to get this puzzle to fit together financially, and it's paid off. And I think, I think they'll kind of regress a little bit to the means. I mean, I don't think they're going to average 2.57 points per game as they are right now, but this is a very good team, very difficult to break down, especially in Orlando in that new stadium. And I think they're going to be right around there for most of the season.
The last thing I have on the agenda before I let you go, Paul, today is an article that you wrote on 442 USA that talks about the stigma of the foreign coach in Major League Soccer and how maybe it's never been real to start with. And now we have Tata Martino, Patrick Vieira, and other international coaches coaching in MLS with some success. Is it dying? Is that stigma dying? And was it there to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly this league has evolved, and I think that coaching jobs more and more now, you have to look at the culture around the coach. You have to look at the infrastructure around the coach. Who is the GM? What is the scouting network like? How much money is being poured into it? Some of it certainly should fall on the coach's shoulders. I mean, there's a difference between Patrick Vieira and Tata Martino, the way they came into this league with doing their research, trying to get to know the league, embracing the job, versus a guy like Ruud Gullit or Aaron Winter, who came in with very little knowledge of MLS to the point where it was going to be impossible to succeed. So certainly that part's changed. But I think as long as you have the correct infrastructure and you have a coach who is willing to deal with the differences of Major League Soccer to the rest of global football, which is the salary budget constraints, then these coaches are going to have a chance to succeed. And you just need to put the people around them that understand the MLS roster rules, that can finagle the money to make sure you get quality players. And I also think the fact that this league now exists where you have targeted allocation money, you have designated player slots that allow you to go get 6-7 high-level players from at a normal price in the international market. That makes the job easier for international coaches as well.
Paul, where can the listeners follow you and read all your work?
Yeah, of course. You can find me on Twitter at Paul Tenorio, or of course follow us 442 USA. That's all spelled out, of course, at 442 USA on Twitter, or 442.com/US.
Paul, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee. You can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramee. Yesterday, we talked on the show about the Tampa Bay Rowdies and the referendum for the Al Lang Stadium and the land proposition. And the voters and the St. Petersburg residents have voted. They have decided. They went out. They went to vote. And they decided to be in favor of the Al Lang Stadium referendum. And that project is going to go through. So if Tampa Bay gets the nod to get the stadium, and that makes just another step for the Rowdies towards MLS being one of the most outspoken of it was 12, maybe it's down to 10 bid of last January 31st. And it is a quite high possibility that Tampa Bay will be maybe one of those two. Tampa, San Antonio, Tampa, Sacramento, Tampa, Detroit, maybe not Detroit for the first two, maybe four for Detroit. But yeah, Tampa Bay. The residents have voted in favor. And the other good aspect of that is when you push the vote, you try to people to go vote. You make a lot of marketing in the local media, uh, public marketing, like in next to highways and on streets and on buses and hashtag MLS to St. Pete and all. You create the awareness of your team at the same time. That brand, the people are exposed to the team, exposed to the brand, exposed to the culture. You might make new fans out of it. And then they vote, and so they feel implicated. So it's a good way to build a project. And I think Tampa Bay is onto something. I think Tampa Bay will, before long, be in Major League Soccer. And speaking of teams that are going to be in Major League Soccer, Los Angeles FC, LAFC, the quote unquote Angels, are eyeing Premier League rate ahead of their inaugural season. We'll see if they make it happen. It comes out of the UK Daily Mail, so it is to be taken with a grain of salt. And be careful how where you get all your news, but it is interesting. Sometimes they are right, you know. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. See, might want to go in a different direction. We all heard about the Chicharito and how that was one of their biggest maybe target for their inaugural season. And you get the Mexican national team fan base involved in your team and all that, right? But if you're dying the Premier League, it could be interesting too. The Premier League is, well, with NBC and the way it is broadcasted in the States, it's a big league, right? It's a very followed league in the States. In the Premier League, if you use players that are known to the American fan base because of the fact that they play in the Premier League and they're seen day in, day out by the American audience, you sign those players to your team. Maybe not even DP level, maybe TAM player level, maybe mid roster type of player level. If you sign them with the LAFC, well, you kind of get more out of that value because of the recognition, the name recognition factor of those players in the market. And that could be a good idea. It could be a good benefit. And it could be maybe the first time we see in North America directly players getting a when the players in LA or players from the Premier League getting a chance in North America, not just DPs, right? So that experiment could be an experiment, and we'll see if LAFC goes that route. I still feel that LAFC can go to the Chicharito route, and that could be very interesting to get fans in the Los Angeles area and Southern California that are Mexican national team supporters to cheer for LA. If you get Chicharito, you get that done. It's done. And that link will be strong. That link might survive after Chicharito's departure a few years after if it's handled correctly. So that is a very I would go that route. That's what I mean. I would go Chicharito, but it's not necessarily easy to convince Chicharito, and it's not necessarily easy to make that happen. And eyeing Premier League talent, that could be a blessing in disguise, maybe for LAFC, because Chicharito, it's good to make one player, but if you can get 4 or 5 players just above, notch above, maybe you have a project there for the long term. Maybe that's what's better. Maybe glitz and glamour for the first year is all well and good, but maybe you need to establish yourself more than just for 1 year. So that is interesting. And speaking of Schweinsteiger, we did talk to Paul about Bastian Schweinsteiger. He was the first pitch throw at the Cubs game last night. Not bad. The ball made it to the plate. It wasn't a strike. It was looked more like a softball pitch. But all he's not used to using his hand, right? He's not. It's not a habit of his to throw balls or to hit balls with his hands. Usually, he can't use them. So for Bastion to throw the first pitch at the Cubs game, it was quite interesting to see. Let's take a quick break here. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS post-game show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Tonight, the first leg of the Voyagers Cup. And that will be, well, our Division 2 Wednesdays segment for this week is to talk about the Voyagers Cup. We're going to have Steven Sandor in about 15 minutes to talk about more about the Edmonton side, but Edmonton, Ottawa, the second installment, well, not second, sorry. The second version of Ottawa. Well, there was the NASL Derby a few years ago, and well, until last year, where Ottawa and Edmonton would face each other once a year in, well, home and away in the Voyagers Cup play-in round and qualification round, and the winner would go. Now that Ottawa's in the USL, they still play that game. So now that they're both Division 2, though, according to the United States Soccer Federation, Edmonton's still playing in the NSL, and you have Ottawa playing in the USL, going to face each other tonight. Who's going to be the winner? Who's going to take the advantage before going into the second leg? It'll be interesting to see if there's difference between the two teams. Two teams are in different league, but technically the leagues are similar. Not a lot of battlefront, not a lot of battlefield between the ASL and USL. We will have the US Open Cup, but direct correlation, direct opposition, it's rare to see. And yeah, this game is going to serve for people who want to know which league is better, and they're going to use the result of this game and the following second leg as a argument for it and the either side. And it's not really the case. It doesn't matter. It's not about who's best. It's not about, oh, this league is better than the other league. It's about what you do with your club. It's not always about the league. It's about what are your personal ambitions as a club. And I have to say, mea culpa. Remember this winter, we talked with Steven many, many times about Edmonton and how, like, oh, they're staying the course. They're saying we're going to get ready for the 2017 season in the NASL. We're going to keep on staying focused and heading that direction. And the way it felt from the outside at that moment, which us, it felt like, well, they're just on a sinking ship and they're just building a brand new room on a sinking ship thinking everything's going to be fine. Turns out they were not just building a brand new room on a sinking ship. They knew that it wasn't sinking. And they got ready for this year. So Edmonton could be strong. I'm not saying they'll pull an upset and beat TFC in the first round of the Voyagers Cup. But I'm saying that Eddies are prepared for the NSL season, having had the offseason to get ready, not necessarily have to build the damn club first and get owners and build all the infrastructures like some of the NSL club had to. Without knowing if there's going to be a league. And The Deltas did a fairly good job of recruitment as well. They'd come later in the off-season calendar where, of course, players are going to wait before signing where Division Two side when there used to be MLS players, they're going to wait like a few weeks more to see if there's more offers coming in, and then they'll commit. You see that happen. But Eddies were fairly confident during the whole NASL/USL Division Two USSF saga that happened in the offseason. They stayed the course, and it showed. It shows now. It shows where the biggest season so far, the most amount of season ticket holders, most amount of attention. Yes, of course, the Edmonton Oilers run in the playoff is taking every single ounce of potential airways coverage and gearing it to hockey. Of course, that's true. But still, slowly but surely, Edmonton will put itself in a situation where get a very good result in the spring season. You make the playoffs. And hey, talk about playoffs. Playoffs? Playoffs. You do truly never know what happens. All right. One thing I want to talk about before we move on to the Steven Sandor interview in a few minutes. Francesco Totti, we talked earlier on the show with Paul Tenario and how Francesco Totti announced his actual retirement of the game at the end of the season. Totti, the last of the Mohicans, I don't know. There's probably very like a bunch and a bunch of other loyal players at the top level and all that. But he is like the figurehead of that. His loyalty has never been in question. That's why, like the little anecdote that Paul said, where a journalist asked Totti, "Are you going to come to MLS?" It's laughable. No, he's not. He didn't want to go to name the club, and they probably were trying to get him back then, and he didn't go there. It's all about the club. It's all about the city. It's all about Rome. He's a kid from the same street that he represents. Talk about that dream. Can you imagine? All right, you're 10 years old. You're playing soccer in the street. What jersey are you wearing? What's your dream? What's the moment that made you fall in love with this game? You're running in your backyard with that ball, and you imagine you're either in the World Cup or in the Champions League final. In the World Cup final, you're wearing your Squadra Azzurri, because we'll use Totti as an example. But he was a fan of Roma. He was wearing a Roma one. That's what he was doing at 10 years old. Well, on the bench, he was playing probably organized soccer by then. Go back to earlier than that when he was younger. And his dream was to play for that club. No one else. And to bring success to that club, to bring that club at a higher level, to bring more people to help that club. And he did. In a fascinating fashion. Always the right way. A true gentleman. Not that he's gentle. Don't cross him between those white lines because you'll pay for it. But what an example for any young players out there. Dedication, hard work makes a big deal. And just look at Francesco Stotti's longevity. You remember he used to play for Italy, but it's been so long that he retired for the national team. And yes, he's been speaking of retirement for the outright game for the last few years. But due to club pressure, club saying, come on, stay another one. Stay another one. We need you. We need you. We need you. We have a good thing going. We had a good crop of players. Share that work ethic. Share that no nonsense, what about me attitude. No. It's about the team attitude. That's what can Totti bring to young players. And that influence that he had is due to, well, the way he took care of his body for years as well. You can't have a 20 plus year career as a whole without taking care of your body. It's gonna give. Something's gonna give. It'll be a ligament, a shoulder, uh, a rotula, a hamstring, and you'll never be the same. And just the luck of the draw, not having your femur broken or whatever hard tackle on you while you're playing, that would make you very injured and make you reconsider your career, right? You never know. You could be a bad tackle away for having to retire in a sport. You never know, unfortunately, what lies ahead of you. And through all that, Totti was an example of dedication in the gym. Well, not necessarily in the gym as like he does lift, bro, but I don't think it's that type of gym. On the pitch, with the ball, without the ball, king of the midfield. Francesco Totti in a very different way. Yeah, we're not gonna make it praise like he's not Messi. It's not the type of player. It's not the type of way he used to take over a game or does. It's different. It's the work rate. It's there. It's the tackle. It's the ball recuperation. It's making players around you better. And Francesco Totti has done that, being the captain, the guy you can rely on. You know he's going to show up. Tom, am I going to start him because he might not give me 100%? Should I go with somebody else or no? Totti's like printed on the game sheet before the manager even writes on it. He's that type of player. Congratulations, Totti. You deserve it. You deserve all the accolade. You for the Roma fans. A fan could like the dream, that type of player that ever played for your team. Like he's the king, he's the pope for you. Anoint him. Number retired, Hall of Fame. What all the name the stadium after him. Like that's how big of a cult hero Totti is for that club. Totti is Roma. How about name the stadium for Totti? Is it too much? Good question. It's hard to tell. You never know. Is it too much or no? And but the Totti Stadium, I don't know. That may be going a little too far. But that's the type of recognition almost that a player as that stature deserves is that ultimate honor, right? What's the ultimate honor in the game nowadays? Number retired, a special ceremony at the UEFA or FIFA Awards next year, congratulating him on his entire career and give him a special trophy or something, lifetime achievement award type of stuff. Yeah. What else? Because it kind of feels like it deserves more. I don't know. The Roma naming the stadium over there, that's probably too much. Yes, I agree. And it's disregarding the history it has before him, which is not necessarily nice to the club itself. And he wouldn't want that probably because, well, it's all about the club and it's not about Totti. So that will be interesting going forward is if or what kind of honor they do give to Totti. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will be talking to Steven Sandor.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Joining me right now from the 11.ca, Steven Sandor. Steven, I know it's busy times for you in Edmonton right now with the Oilers and McDavid and all that, but FC Edmonton tonight, they are playing in the first leg of the qualification round for the Amway Canadian Championship, the Workers' Cup, and it's important.
Yeah, just wish the timing of this game was a little bit better. Again, I know proof again that the CSA, when they redo this tournament, I guess next year when the Ontario and Quebec teams come in and some of the lower division teams come in, they really need to think about the timing of this tournament. Timing this against the teeth of the Stanley Cup playoffs year after year will only guarantee that this tournament, despite some extremely exciting games over the years, some 97 extra time finishes, gets absolutely ignored. And until the CSA figures out that they got to get this thing away from the spring where it is right now, it's a game that I feel like, wow, I'm talking about soccer again. It's like the first time in other than the broadcasts we do that anyone's actually wanted to talk about soccer in this city over the last month, and that's a problem. And they've had this problem year after year after year, no matter what market. I mean, we have Edmonton and Ottawa playing in this game tonight, and guess which two NHL teams are left alive? And so
I know, right?
In terms of Canadian interest, so I think it's gonna be sparsely covered, and it's really, in the end, it's the Canadian Soccer Association's own fault for trying to ram this against the teeth of what really is the busiest and most important time of the sports calendar for the average Canadian sports fan. And I just don't know why they do it. They may as well. It would be like the Americans putting the U.S. Open Cup on Super Bowl Sunday. I don't know why they do it.
Well, exactly, and it's hard for our American listeners and international listeners to understand what we're talking about. Because they're just playing at the same time as hockey. It's different fans. It's not about the fan. It's the city itself. Nothing is actually working to its full efficiency when a team is in the playoff like this right now, and looking like this, and performing like this, and having the energy and the vibe like what Edmonton has or Ottawa has. Never mind going to the store. The store is closed during the game. All right, the convenience store is going to be closed
when the game's on, and everyone's wearing their orange jerseys to work, and everyone is talking about it. And I know even media departments. I mean, I'm at every hockey game right now, which is great, and it's a great ride to be on, and it's a lot of fun. And even the media organizations, everyone's working overtime covering hockey, so they don't have time to cover anything else because they're taking all their time off.
Regular journalists are now being transferred to the sports department for the playoff run,
and even like the general interest guys are being sent to do the going to the arena to do the people are paying $85 to stand in the concourse of the arena. Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's I think maybe for your American friends, that's the thing. If you're not really sure how big hockey is here, people are spending $85 in Edmonton for a ticket to stand in the hallway of the arena to watch the game on a screen, but not actually go and watch the game on the ice.
Hey, you're not far away.
In the arena, but they don't actually get a seat at the arena.
I'm pretty sure if this continues the way it is, Stephen, next away game, they're going to fill Rogers Arena inside.
They already have for all the away games because they're doing that. I mean, it is... But I'm just saying, it's a soccer show and we're talking about hockey, but I think that shows the nature of the beast right now in this city, and really shows the lack of foresight on the CSA's part. I mean, they wouldn't know, when they were scheduling this, the Oilers would be as good as they are, or the Senators would be as good as they are. But the fact is, they knew the hockey playoffs would be happening. And again, for anyone who doesn't know Canada that well, for viewers outside or the listeners outside of Canada, sorry, I said viewers, I'm used to my TV stuff.
That's fine.
The listeners outside, it is like Super Bowl Sunday, like every second night of the week. And it's going to be like that until the Stanley Cup's awarded. And until people come up here to actually understand what this, how it changes everything in Canada, the Stanley Cup playoffs. So this is the year with all the Canadian teams that's roared back. We were saying hey, hockey's maybe not be as popular as it used to be. And this seems to be the year where hockey's kind of went, I'm back. And it's really changed it for everybody.
All right, let's talk about the actual game tonight. The soccer one, FC Edmonton, Ottawa Fury. How important is a goal for Edmonton to beat Ottawa, then to qualify to go back to the World Cup?
I think it's doubly important for both teams. I think, both leagues, I think, to their credit, have been quiet, both the USL and NASL, in terms of really putting this rivalry like, not talking trash to each other. And honestly, Twitter and the message boards have been quite quiet in the USL versus NASL thing, which I think is a nice thing. I think it's two teams that have traditionally been rivals before the Fury moved from NASL to USL, getting back together. But I think most importantly for both teams, they're both off to miserable starts to their seasons. And this is a chance to sort of right their ships to get things going. Edmonton's only won 1 of their first 5. The Fury are 1-2-2 in second last place in the East in the USL. Edmonton's in last place in the NASL. These are two teams that are struggling right now. Both know that they could want to do a lot better. And, this isn't just about getting a cup win and getting a chance to face Toronto FC. It's really about getting this poor start out of their systems. And I think they're both going to be really looking at this game as a way to jumpstart their season.
Now, I've talked in the earlier segment to Stephen about Edmonton, and I remember this offseason, we were all wondering what's happening because it felt like Edmonton was building a brand new room on its sinking ship. That ship has been made afloat and seems like they had an opportunity with the roster, with the support that they actually biggest amount of season tickets sold for Edmonton. So they had like momentum heading into the season. Did that momentum carry up to today?
I think actually fan-wise and ticket-wise it did. And again, we were just talking about how big hockey is, but at the same time, Edmonton's played 2 home games in terrible weather, both of them. We've had a very late winter here, and the last game was played in the snow. But yet they're drawing much better than they did last year. They're getting about they're getting close to 4,000 than they are to 3,000, which for them is very, very good. These crowds are up significantly. Moving this game to Saturday night seems to have really struck a chord with the Edmonton sports fan, and I think that's been a good thing. The team itself, though, and there's been a lot of the games have been decided that Edmonton's lost. They've been close, but by a dreadful error by the Eddies, a dreadful defensive error has ended up undoing them in the game, where you would say, wow, there were 2 games on the road where they were well beaten in North Carolina and last weekend in Miami. But the defense that last year only allowed 21 goals in 32 games has yet to have a clean sheet this year. They, obviously changing netminders is a big thing with Matt Van Oekel moving on from FC Edmonton to MLS in Real Salt Lake. I think Chris Konopka is still getting a feel for what it's like to be the goalie at FC Edmonton, to be a number 1 guy. And I think, honestly, there's been some struggles, not just on the defensive 4, which has been a surprise, but also in the midfield in terms of leaving gaps for other teams to go through. And Edmonton, always know that they're not going to be a super high scoring team. I put that nicely. But this year, their problem is they're giving up goals. And instead of always being in games because they're just stingy on the back end, they're chasing a lot of games and chasing a lot of games early by having to give up a lot of early goals in games. And they've got to fix that.
All right, now we have the Ottawa side. You mentioned the NASL, now Ottawa and the USL, and it's been tough for the last few months, the relationship with the supporters. Did they lose? Did they gather a new one? Are the fans going to get behind this project? And it's a touchy issue for the supporters as well, because they don't want to be seen as a feeder club, and they're not. The relationship with the Montreal Impact is very limited to just a few loans, and now Michael Salazar will be loaned to Ottawa Fury. But it's a very limited partnership, as it's just a few loan players basically, and Ottawa's managed its own team its own way, and it's more close to the Fury of the NASL time than anything else in the organization infrastructures. It's still similar. Academy aside, it's still similar to what it used to be. What is your view, Stephen, on Ottawa in the USL this season and adding to tonight?
I think Ottawa has been very clever. I think you're right. I think they did some things that are very interesting. They announced this affiliation with Montreal Impact, and if there's any USL team that's affiliated, that's affiliation is any looser than the one that exists between Montreal and Ottawa, I'd like to see it. Let's face it, most of FC Montreal's players from last year are either unemployed or they're playing for other USL teams.
Or there's a few abroad and there's a few in the PLSQ and
they
League
didn't
One
land in
Ontario.
Ottawa. It's a very loose relationship. I think we both can agree on that. It feels like they didn't even need an affiliation. The Impact could have just loaned them 3 or 4 players, just sort of how the Whitecaps used to loan FC Edmonton a couple of players. They never had a formal affiliation, but just the Whitecaps, if they needed a guy ahead time or needed to get a guy at playing time, they would loan FC Edmonton. We've seen that before. This is really, it feels no different, that relationship between Montreal and Ottawa. Except I think with that, putting it in writing, it allows Ottawa some protections in terms of what they do with their roster, that they're still independent so they can play in the Cup, that they don't have the same kind of roster rules that the Whitecaps 2 and TFC 2 have to deal with in USL. But at the same time, that affiliation gives them a bit of a tie and an anchor if they're asked to, let's say, move to another league. They have some freedom to sort of choose for themselves because they have that affiliation. I think it's worked out okay for them. I think there's still, I think Ottawa, that market is still finding itself, just like Edmonton is. I do think that they are, obviously they're working to save some money, and they did this in the NASL too. Like, I mean, let's face it, last year, this isn't new. This was all part of a couple-year project. I mean, one of the reasons why I think Mark Dos Santos, who was coaching 2 years ago, left the club, is he understood that money, that he wasn't going to get the kind of budget that he thought he was going to get for this club. And they made a lot of roster changes before last year's NASL season, and made a lot of ones before this year's USL season. It's a very interesting roster that they have in Ottawa. Certainly not as many Canadians as I think everyone would have expected, simply considering that you're thinking, hey, you're trying to run something in USL, that there have been a lot of opportunities for Canadian players, and it's definitely like less than we saw in NASL, which is I think was the opposite of what everyone was expecting. I don't think anyone knows really what to make of this team or what kind of team this team doesn't have an identity yet. I think people know with a Colin Miller FC Edmonton team, what the identity of FC Edmonton is. I don't think we know yet under Paul Dalglish in USL what the Ottawa Fury are yet. And I think the fact, I talked with Eddie Edward yesterday, and I think he's played 4 or 5 different positions this year already in like 5 games, shows you just how much there's tinkering going on in Ottawa, and they're trying to just to work out some things and see what's going on.
To talk about the tournament as a whole, Stephen, the Voyageurs Cup is kind of like an unfolding pattern until the next few years, where it might go through radical changes. How important is the evolution right now of this tournament from literally a supporters-founded cup 17 years ago to where it is now and where it's heading? How do you see the evolution of this tournament?
We desperately need to grow this tournament. Clearly, and again, when you're inside the soccer supporter circle, you tend to see things that way. So you see things as soccer supporters do, and it's a big deal to us. We care, but then we see outside, as we just talked about it. There's no television coverage of the first, this game tonight. It's gonna be live. It's gonna be streamed. But the fact is that it doesn't have mainstream appeal, and you need to cross over and create some for the average sports fan to put it on the radar. And despite what have been some fantastic games, and honestly, and I think we can go back to last year's final with the Will Johnson broken leg goal. This is the kind of stuff, if it happened in other cup finals, we'd be talking about the stuff of legend. If someone in FA Cup breaking his leg with a winning kick.
He's a legend for sure.
It would be talked about for 100 years.
Well, he would be on flags in the supporter section for 100 years, like you mentioned. He would be on 2 sticks forever.
Yeah, and I think we can go back to that. I call it whatever it was, but I think over a 2-leg series, that Montreal Edmonton series from a couple of years ago, that was decided at the end with the Patrice Bernier penalty kick, and the controversy and stuff that surrounded it. Whatever you think of it, that 2-game series was riveting. It was absolutely, from the get-go, was can't miss soccer, at least for the people that are involved in it. They understood how big that tournament was. The Edmonton-Vancouver series that was decided in the 97th minute of the second game. Also, a great series. We've seen some really topsy-turvy results. I mean, going back to the miracle in Montreal for Toronto FC when it wasn't a cup final, but a full round robin tournament. But it hasn't translated. We haven't, in the soccer community, been able to translate that, and part of that's timing of the tournament. And the tournament still sees there's only 5 teams in it. Why should we care? I strongly believe, I'm very supportive that they're going to have the League One Ontario and the Quebec, champ come in. I would love to see the team that wins, the senior amateur champion, which was Edmonton Scottish last year, get invited. And in fact, I've spoken with Edmonton Scottish, and they would have loved. They fully support that. There's a big movement amongst the senior amateur teams. So many former pros or former CIS players play there. That why don't we get a bid? I mean, how awesome would that have been to have seen Edmonton? I mean, as a local derby, possibly Edmonton Scottish having to play FC Edmonton in a cup game. The best amateur side from the city playing the pro side and testing their mettle. I think those are the kind of things that this tournament needs. It needs underdogs. It needs those kind of stories. And the timing of the tournament needs to change in some way. I know the MLS teams would complain to high heaven if they move this into the summer.
Yeah.
But it is, you're playing for next year's Champions League anyway, so why not have it later in the year? Get it away. Like, it shouldn't start until the Stanley Cup is over. It needs to get into a clearer spot in the sports schedule.
Steven, where can the listeners find you and appreciate all your work?
Just the 11.ca is a place to go. Plastic Pitch Magazine has an app as well that you can find on Apple and Google. But and you can find links to it on the 11.ca, the11.ca. Don't spell out 11. And that's where you can, and obviously hear our broadcasts for FC Edmonton. And we'll be calling the second leg for Canada Soccer next Wednesday on air. So we will see how that goes. I think it's going to be a really good 2-legged series between Edmonton and Ottawa, between two very desperate teams.
Steven, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And until tomorrow, 10 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Today, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.